Everybody. Okay, it says I'm live. Hi, everybody. Let's see who's out there already. I see Trudy, Inez, Linda. Hi, Robin. I see Christine and Pam and Hazel. Welcome, everybody. Linda Smith, how are you? Welcome, everybody. You guys know what we're going to be working on. Yes, we are continuing with this quilt up here. I have put the handout up at the top. If you are looking for the handout, you can always find it at www.jellyrollclub.com, and you're looking for the Mystery Stars handout. So if you can't find any of those, just go there, and I promise they're linked up. And I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the website, www.jellyrollclub.com. This is the home page. It may show up a little bit different for you, but you can click on this at the bottom, or you can click at the banner at the top, and it takes you there, and it shows you all of the stars that we've worked on, and it has a video and a handout for every star. And we are down here at the bottom looking at video 17, handout 17, and it has templates. So if you click on the templates, you get these. You're going to need to look at those because this has some odd math. And then it also has a handout which tells you how to cut all of your pieces. So it gives you the sizes, it gives you the layout, and it shows you the star in more detail. So this is what we're building tonight. We're building the ribbon star. I designed this block so that it can be used in a variety of ways. This is the perfect block if you're making a patriotic quilt to make a bunch of these in different varieties of red, white, and blue. Or if you just want to make a fun starry quilt, you can use yellows, you can use neon colors. This would be great if you have some bright cafe or tulip pink fabric, so it looks good in every flavor. All right, so let me show you what's going on. All right, friends, can you guys see my hands? All right, so let me show you what we've got going on. So this is what I did. I designed this star, and when I design a star, sometimes I get weird math, and let me kind of show you guys what this is. So this is like 3 7/8 inch for this piece, 4.5 for this one. So it gives me sometimes weird math, and sometimes I could break it down and round it for you and make it easier, and sometimes I can't. In this case, I could not. So what I did is I divided this into quadrants and I made templates. So if you look at your pattern, it has 4 pieces that are equal and the same, that look like this. So you're going to have quadrants, and we're going to build this as a 4-patch. And the pieces that you have, there's not too many. So if you download the templates, you're going to get the pieces that match all the weird math. And so if you download this, this should measure 4.5 inches, and that is part A. You should also have 2 identical pieces that are labeled B and C, and they're identical, but they're mirror image. So that's why they have different numbers. So B and C look like this. And this is how they fit. And then you have piece D, which is the big piece. Now, these are the pieces that you're going to need to build these blocks. I use these to cut my fabric. And if you notice, this one has the little tail sticking out. Sometimes when I use my templates and it has an edge, it goes all the way out instead of blunting it. So this is with the little easy corners cut out so that when you lay it, nothing is sticking out. So that's why you have these little blunted corners on the templates. But if you want to leave that tail and leave that 1/4 inch, if it helps you, you can do that as well. All right, let me show you how we're going to be putting this block together. So you're going to need, because you have quadrants, you're going to need 4 of piece C in background, 4 of piece C in a color, 4 of piece B in background, 4 of piece D in a color, and then you need A in a background, 4 of those. So you need 4 of each of these pieces. All right, so let me show you what we're building. So for piece C, right, I left the little tail. I didn't blunt it off. I just left it there. I also have the little piece that goes at the bottom, which is blue in this case. It goes right there. So when I remove C, this is C at the top and C at the bottom. So it's C like this and C like that. Always cut your pieces if you're using templates with the printed side up, and just check for that. All right, so that's piece C. For piece A, you guys already said that this is a square. And for piece B, it goes this way, and D, it goes this way. And so these are the pieces that we need. Little short C's on this side, a short D, a long D, a short B. So this is B, C, A, and D. And this one is the same, but flipped around. Okay, so now that I have my pieces, I'm going to put it together. And if you notice, I did not blunt those edges. Now you blunt those edges, and you are able to lay this down like this, and it should fit exactly correct. So you can do it either way, and I'm going to show you both ways. Blunting the edges and not blunting the edges. So I'm going to pin this on here. When I use a template, I use the side of my ruler, and then I just lay it down and I trim all of my bits off. So in this case, I want to trim so that it matches all of these. So I'm just going to use the side of my ruler and my rotary cutter like this, and I'm just going to lay it down and trim off those excess pieces. You can always also use a scissors. So you're just going to blunt those off, and B sits just like that. Then I have this piece, which is D. And I'm going to go ahead and blunt those edges off. I'm just going to lay this down. And if you have flat pins like this, these work much better than the knobby pins. So you can just pin that down, and these flat pins are great for this. So I'm just going to lay that down. You can also use freezer paper so that it sticks to your fabric and it doesn't wiggle around. That's always a great option. But I've blunted those ends, and what those little blunted ends do with these pieces is it makes so that they fit like this, and then you can just sew. Now, another way of doing this is not blunting the edges and just trimming it straight over to the edge. And then all you have to do if you do it that way is take your piece and offset it by 1/4 of an inch on both sides like this, so that when you press that open, it's exactly where you want it to be. So you could either use the blunted edges or the non-blunted edges. Either way, it works. So if you're not blunting, you're going to offset it by 1/4 of an inch because that's a 45-degree angle, or you can do it like this. All right, we're going to take all of those pieces and we're going to pin them together because pinning is really helpful. And it just keeps it from moving. So I like long pins for this. And then I'm going to use another pin over here. I prefer the longer the pins, the better. And I'm going to pin it way out of the way. And that just keeps those from sliding. And I'm going to take them to my machine. And I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch across both of those. Hey everybody, if you are new, please say hello to each other. And if this is your first time, please use the chat to ask all the questions you want. I will pause in just a little bit and check those and see what it looks like. All right, so I'm going to head to the machine. And you guys can see in the corner the quadrant that we're working with. And I'm using diagonal seam tape on my machine because this is super helpful. So let me show you. I'm going to lay it right there. By using the diagonal seam tape, it allows me to align this in 3 places. It allows me to align it on the side at the 1/4 inch seam line, and it allows me to keep it straight. And so I love diagonal seam tape. This stuff is made by Amy Gibson from Cluck Cluck Sew, but you can also buy generic stuff online. But I always give the creator of something her full credit, and this was made by Cluck Cluck Sew, and you can find it on her website. It's not expensive at all. All right, so now that I have this one, I'm going to go ahead and sew that too. and line up those little blunted edges. And this is a bias, so you're going to want to kind of take it easy. Don't push or pull through the machine, just let it take it in. All right. This is all that you have to sew for each quadrant is 2 pieces. This one is super easy. Unlike some of the other ones we've had, this one is easy peasy lemon squeezy, I promise. All right. We're going to take this. Whenever I have a bias edge that I have sewn, I always set that seam to kind of shrink that back. It reduces distortion and it makes my piecing more accurate. So see how it kind of rumples a little bit, it ruffles when you sew a seam. You just take it and then you press like that, and then you press it flat. And what that does is that takes that so where they have a shape again, and it's nice and flat. Now before I start opening this up, I'm going to want to snip this little bunny ear right off. I just snip it off to help me. I'm going to snip the other bunny ear. Okay, now let me show you something about the construction of this block. Now this block has 2 seams right here that meet together in a corner, if you notice, right there. Because you have an intersection of 2 seams coming together, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to press one up and press the other one down. Anytime that you have interlocking seams like that, and you press one direction and one the other, it just makes those pieces match a lot nicer. And so I'm going to take my small piece and I'm going to press it towards the dark. So I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to finger press towards the dark like this. And then this one is going to get finger pressed towards the light. And this is one thing I don't like about the blunted edges. Sometimes the bunny ears get cut off a little bit too deep, and so that's one of the reasons why I prefer sometimes this method over the other one. And if it's too deep like this one, then I may have to come back and stitch it a little bit deeper. So let me just fix that really quick. I don't like it when my angle gets off kilter. And so I'm just going to fix that angle right now before I get any further. And you just have to watch it. Anytime that you are sewing at an angle, you really have to watch that you start that and line it up so that you don't end up losing your pieces. There we go. So this is going to go like this. And now I'm going to trim this. I want to make sure that this is 2.5 inches wide, so I'm going to lay my 2.5 inch ruler on top of that. And I have a little bit of excess right here, so I'm going to trim that off. And that can happen when you're using templates, so I'm just going to trim off the excess. And I'm going to line it up on this side. I have a 45-degree line, so if I wanted to straighten it up, and it's off by just a hair, I'm going to line it up this way. And so by sliver trimming it, I get that nice and straight and I get the piece that I want. And that'll make my final piece match up better. The same with this one. I'm going to line up that 45-degree line right there. And I'm just going to check that my piece is nice and straight, and it should be. And that it's still approximately 2.5 inches. I want to make sure that that's not too skinny or too wide. Right. All right, now when I measure this piece here should measure 4.5 inches. So I can just check it really quick with my ruler. And if it measures 4.5 inches, which that one is just a thread longer than 4.5 inches, which is fine. And then I'm going to line it up with this one to see if they match, and they do. But where this one is a tiny bit bigger, I'm just going to slide it up. And I'm going to trim this one from this side to that side so that it's 4.5 inches. And then that intersection will match. So I'm just always double checking to make sure that my pieces match. And so by making sure that this first piece is 4.5 inches and that these angles match right here, then when I do my final construction, I will end up with a nice, perfect block. And that's what I want. I want these units to match up and look nice together. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of units that I've already put together so you can see, because I'm going to put this entire block together for you. So I have a couple of units I've already done, and they look kind of weird, but they're fine. And then so here we go. So when we put this together, we're going to put it together like this. And so you're going to want this one and this one, if you're doing 2 colors, to go like this. So I'm going to go ahead and put this unit together, this other quadrant, and then I'm going to put all 4 pieces together so you can see it. All right, so I'm going to start with this top quadrant. I need a unit C up here. So a unit C and a unit A, and I'm going to sew these together. And these are 4.5 inches, and my square is 4.5 inches. So I'm going to pin it through that seam. And the reason I want that is so it doesn't flip when I'm sewing. And then when I'm done, I'm going to sew this other piece on there. And so let's get rolling. Super easy. Christine says, how are we supposed to cut the templates on the fabric? Right sides together? And so, Christine, how I cut those is I put the correct side of the template up. And if you are cutting them, I cut them one at a time. But if you want to cut for piece A, and let's see, B and C, I did cut those right sides together. But all of these can be cut just one at a time. What I did is I stacked all of my blue pieces. I put like 4 pieces up, and then I laid my template and cut them all out. So for C, right, I laid 4 pieces of blue facing up, all right sides up, and then I laid template C down and cut them all out. And I did the same for these. I laid all of them out the correct length, which I think was like 6 inches. And then I laid all 4 pieces down, and then I cut them out. And so that's how I did that in order to ensure that all of my pieces were facing the correct direction. Is that making sense? And I'll stop and answer a couple more questions in a minute and then finish up my tips, because this one is super easy. All right, so let's go back to where we were. I'm attaching a double C to an A, and I'm going to sew down one side, and I'll be right back. Line that straight up. I always sew with the solid piece on the bottom and the piece on top, because that produces the least amount of stretch for me. And I'm sewing from the color to the background. And then I'm going to press this open. So I have this. I'm going to stretch that out with my finger, and I'm going to finger press it towards the background like this. And that's what it should look like. And when I lay it here, it should measure 6.5 inches, which it does. And so now I know it's ready for the next piece. The next piece is going to go this way, and so it's going to go with the points going outward. And so I'm going to lay this here. And this should measure 6.5 inches, which it does. But this has little like teeth on this piece. So I'm going to make sure that I lay this piece on top. And when I sew this, because this feels like it's a smidge bigger than it should be, I'm going to sew it with the slightly bigger piece to the bottom. Normally I don't sew it that way, but this time I will, because I'm trying to ease in a tiny bit of extra. And so I'm going to smooth it with my fingers, like this. And I don't use any starch on these pieces. They're not starched, and the reason I don't is because it allows me to do this. When your pieces are overly starched, it makes them really hard to manipulate, and then there's no room for error. So I use a light amount of starch on my fabric, but not a ton. I use this heavy finish only if I'm doing a ton of 45-degree angles and I'm working with a bunch of biases. But other than that, I don't really starch my pieces that much. Okay, so I'm going to straighten it out, make sure it's nice and straight, and now I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down. Let's see if you guys can see me. There we go. All right. Turned out I didn't have to ease it very much at all, so I'm going to go ahead and sew it the way I normally sew. But if you ever have a piece that's like a 1/16 of an inch or less off, if you put the slightly bigger piece on the bottom, your sewing machine will ease the difference and you don't have to worry about your accuracy that way. All right. And like I said, for those of you who want to see me cut those pieces, I'll show you how I cut them in just a minute. So I'm going to press, and then I'm going to press this towards the long piece. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I get to the back, it's going to take all my bulk away from the middle. And so now I'm just going to take and carefully press this. And when I press, I'm not scrubbing with my iron. I'm just usually laying my iron down. Okay. And so I will make 4 quadrants that look like this. And I will put these together just like this. Just like this. And then I have one more to build. Now, the fun thing about this ribbon star is if I wanted to make these 2 pieces the same color and these 2 pieces the same color, it would look like those Swedish stars that are woven. So if you wanted to take this and use holiday colors, like if you wanted to do Hanukkah colors, or Christmas colors, or whatever you celebrate, this would be a great star to do with some woven color. So play with color with this one because it's a lot of fun. All right, so this is the last quadrant, so I'm going to build it like this. I'm going to put this one here. Right? And this one here. And notice that this one is slightly longer than my square, so I'm going to have to butt it up against here. And that could have happened just from sewing, or maybe my seam was off just a hair. That happens. So I'm going to line it up against the piece that it's going to go against, and I'm going to trim a sliver off of here, and then that should fit just correctly. And then I will check this one down here. And that one looks like it's going to fit correctly, so I won't have to sliver trim this one. If I do, I'm sliver trimming from this side. So anytime that you have an angle in the middle of a piece, your pieces can stretch a little bit. So when I adjust this, I'm going to adjust it from this side. All right, so I'm going to take this piece here, and I'm going to check that it's 4.5 inches, and if I have to sliver trim, I need to remove from that top. So this is 4.5 inches, and it's a tiny bit bigger, so I'm going to sliver trim from that end to make sure my piece fits. Again, like I did before, I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to pin this long seam through there, and I'm going to go sew it on the machine. Anytime that I draw a block, and that's just me, I try to visualize all the different ways that the block could be used because I really do love a versatile star block. There we go, look at that nice hot iron. And now we're going to lay this down and see how it's off just a little bit. See how it's off just a smidge? So I'm going to put the quadrant that fits below here against it, see which way it goes, and it looks like the excess for this piece is on this side, so I'm going to measure 6.5 inches, and I'm going to remove the excess that doesn't belong off of this side, just to make sure that my pieces are lining up. It's important to trim as you go and get your pieces nice and accurate by trimming each subsegment. So now that looks like it should fit. Let me see this over here again. That's going to fit. And this is off by just a hair. So I lost a little bit. That seam over here was probably a tiny bit big, but that's okay. I'm adjusting as I go. And I'm going to lay this down. And I know that I'm going to have to sliver trim that off, and I'm okay with that because it's going to match up my other piece. Some blocks are a little bit picky, and this one is because it has the weird math. And so my software tries to round it to like a 16th, and that can cause it to be off a little bit. And that sometimes happens when you get commercial patterns and you get measurements every now and again. You're like, why are these things not matching? And so because software is imperfect sometimes and we get odd math, then that can happen. But that's why I try to do my best to show you guys how to fix anything that might be off on your block. And actually that's not off too bad. Just needed some good pressing. All right, so that one is going to go towards the big square. Is how I'm pressing all of these, and they're all pressed the same. I use my wool mat because my wool mat makes it more accurate. And there we have it. Look, now it's just off a tiny bit. Pressing fixes a multitude of problems. All right, so now that I have all of these, I'm going to line them up in quadrants with matching pieces. And so I want these two to match. So this is an important junction for my pieces. And then I want these two to match right here. So this is going to be an important junction for my pieces, right? And it looks like these are going to match, and it looks like these are going to match. So let's go ahead and sew this together. I pressed this down and the other one up, and I did that so that I can take these two and press them together like this, pinch it, and then those two lock together, and I'm going to get a nice accurate intersection right there. And so I'm going to go sew this, and it looks like that's pretty accurate. 6.5 inches across, sew 1/4 inch. Ooh, the rain is starting to come down here. Hopefully it'll cool things off. It has been hot, hot, hot around here and very humid. All right, so now I'm going to trim that off. And I'm going to show you half of my star and see what it looks like. Ah, look at that. So that matches exactly. And then my points are floating so that they're not going to get chopped off. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to push that seam to the left, because when I sew the other one, I'm going to push the seam to the right, and I'm going to get that center to match perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and press this. And when I press this, it should measure 12 inches across. And let's see if that does. It should. And it measures 12.5. Oh, I'm sorry, friends. What does it say? Yep, this is a 12.5 inch, 12 by 12 finished, so it's 12.5 unfinished. And that can get confusing anytime that you're reading patterns. And so look at this. The top edges match, this part matches, and this matches. Now I just need to get the bottom half to match. So this one is going to line up like that. Looks like that is correct. I'm going to have to measure it to make sure that it's 6.5 inches. And then I'm going to have to line up this one right there to make sure that it's 6.5 inches. And it looks like they're going to line up nicely. So I'm just going to take and press this really quick. And I'm going to flip this one on top of the other. And again, I'm going to take this here and I'm going to push one seam into each other. I've pressed them opposite directions when I built the subunits. So that will make for a nice matching seam. And anything that's off, I'm going to push towards the middle or towards the top, the outside, that I'm going to trim off. But this, I want it to match. All right, so I'm going to sew that part. And there we have it. I was so excited about this star that I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. I started constructing the block almost as soon as I printed my templates this afternoon, and I really should have waited and showed you guys all the steps, but I got in such a hurry. I'm sorry about that, friends. Let's see. Inez, you have 33 blocks of Meet Me in Paris done. That's awesome. All right, so this unit here has the center pressed to the left, right? And so that means that I'm going to press this center the opposite direction to the right. And so I'm just going to take and push that seam flat. And I'm going to take this iron and give it a press, and that matches nicely there. And now all I have to do is match both of these intersections. I have this one and this one. So I'm going to try to make sure that they both match. And so that's going to be tricky. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull it this way. And this is the reason I wanted you to watch me build the entire star, because this star had odd math. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to match this one over here. And any wiggle room that's left is going to be in the middle, and I'm going to show you why. All right, so that's going to match up right here. And so I'm going to use a couple of pins. Okay, so this, I'm going to match it right there. And I'm going to pin it through that intersection. But now when I hold it, do you see that this side is just a tiny bit bigger? I can do two things right now. I can actually take this one and take a check out of that seam to see if that seam was wide enough. And I can see that it was a little bit too thin here. So I'm going to come in and actually take a little bit bigger seam, and that will fix this difference that I have in the middle right there. And that will ensure that my pieces line up and match perfectly in every quadrant. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to take it to the machine, and I'm going to sew just a tiny bit more along this edge, because my 1/4 of an inch was a little bit too narrow. And what that did is it made my star bow right in the middle. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to fix that before I get too far along. And a lot of times when you see videos, you see a lot of perfection because they've edited all the boo-boos out. But I always like to live stream and show you the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that you can see everything that's happening with these blocks. I don't want you to feel frustrated, especially new quilters. And maybe other quilters too. I've been quilting for a long time. All right, so now that I've fixed that, I'm just going to finger crease it with my finger, and now they lay perfectly flat, and I can match both of these intersections. So I have just fixed my block, and then I'm going to sew it right there. Just slide that into place, and then I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way across. I can finally match those middles like I should, opposite directions. And I'm going to pin on either side of that middle to keep it flat. And now I'm ready to sew this half. And if there's any extra, you always want to put it on the bottom. So anything that sticks out that shouldn't goes on the bottom. I take and slide it to where it needs to go and pin it into place. And then I am ready to sew my final seam on this one. I call it pinning it to death, right? And so now I come here, I start at the top, take my time to make sure that 1/4 inch is accurate. I'm going to pull the pin because that's a fat pin and I don't want to tear up my machine. Always hold those little pieces down, those seams, so they don't go every which way. And now I'm going to have intersections that match like they should. Double check that bottom piece. Make sure it's going the right way. Pull a pin. Don't be shy. Mine stretched just a smidge because I was playing with it, but that's okay. I'm going to fix it. And there we have it. All right. Look at this star. I'm really happy with this. All right, so this is what I have. And these match right here. But most importantly, they match in these intersections right here. And so now my ribbon star goes where it needs to go. And I'm going to press it because I did a lot of playing with that center seam. So I'm going to press it down and then I'm going to press it open. Now you notice that this is off right here, so I'm going to have to trim. And one of the things that I will do, I don't like to use water on my blocks, but I will this one. And I'm stretching it out just a hair. And I'm going to give it a tiny smidge of starch. And then I'm going to press it outward and kind of smooth it so that I can get it nice and square and flat. And then I'm going to let it dry for a second. And I'm going to give it a good press with a hot iron. And I really love this star. I love that the points float so that they don't get chopped off if you have to trim it down to a 12 inch. Because some of our blocks were a little bit smaller and some were a little bit bigger. But I really love this block. I tried to draw it so that none of the points would get chopped off. And I love how this turned out. What do you guys think? Please give this a thumbs up if you like this block. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because I give away all my patterns for free. I don't know anybody else who does that, but all my patterns are 100% free. There's nothing to buy. There's no memberships, nothing. There you go. Look at that gorgeous star. And like I said, if you wanted to, you could make these one color and this another color and this another color. And you could pick 4 different colors and it would make a totally fun block. Now all I have to do, now that it's done, is I could line up my ruler. And one way of trimming it, if you don't have a big ruler, is to just line it up. This is the 6.5 inch ruler. But if I wanted to, I could take this 1/4 inch mark and line it up at the 6 1/4 inch. And then I could trim 4 sections from the center out. So if you ever wanted to do that, you can just line it up with this middle with the 6 1/4, and you could trim it that way. But there you guys have it. This is a beautiful star. I love how it turned out. I'm just going to sliver trim the side. It's a little bit wompy, and I'm going to leave well enough alone. And I think this one is definitely going to go into my quilt. I'm just going to trim a tiny sliver trim off of each of these edges to make them straight. Because whenever you press, you can distort just a little bit. And then I'm just making these nice and straight. And I think this one, my friends, is done. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think I'm liking this star quite a bit. Taking those nice edges and just barely sliver trimming them so that it's still 12.5 and those edges are straight and that star is done. All right, friends. Does anybody need me to go over the cutting instructions? If so, You can stay and I'll go over the cutting instructions one more time slowly for those who need it. The rest of you, go make some beautiful stars. Look at that. It's so pretty. I think I'm going to replace a couple of the stars in my quilt with this one that I wasn't a fan of. I do like that a lot. All right, for those of you who wanted to see how I cut the pieces, I'm going to show you really quick. And so what I did is I just laid several of these pieces on top of each other like this would be a C. And then I would just lay this right where it goes like this. And I could pin it in place. I like to use flat pins for this. But you can just pin it in place like this. And I would just take my ruler along this edge, fabric facing up and template facing up, and cut along that edge. Then rotate it the other way, fabric facing up, and just kind of do the other side. And then you can nip that off if you want, just like this, or not. So I usually just leave it on, it doesn't matter. But this is how I would cut two pieces, always facing up, the printed side up, and that way they're all the same. And this is how I cut all of them. Oh, let me show you the back seams again. Absolutely. So let me move all these pieces, and this is how I cut the pieces. I didn't want to spend a bunch of time at the beginning having you watch me cut, but the seams out here in the back, right? So this is kind of swirled in the middle. If you want to swirl it, you can. But this seam here goes towards the dark. This seam goes towards the light. So if you have this long piece, you're pressing towards the background. This dark piece, you're pressing towards the dark. And by doing that, it enables these corners all to match, right? And if you are off in the slightest, you can be off a tiny bit in the middle and you won't even notice because you have all these reds coming together, okay? All right, there it is. And this is how this is put together. Like I said, for this one, because it had some odd math, I felt that it was better for you to see that. And this is put together in 4 units. And I make the first unit, I trim it to 6.5 inches, and then I build the unit beside it, the unit beside it, the unit beside it, so that I know that I'm getting all of these little intersections to match as I go along. All right, everybody, it is 6:43. We will meet again in 2 weeks to finish this unit, and I will start putting together my block, and I'm going to start releasing some bonus stars that you guys can use to fill in all of the empty spaces on the design. Because if you look at that right there, there's a few empty spaces, and that's where you're going to put your bonus stars, or you're going to duplicate the stars that you like. All right, friends, I will see you in 2 weeks to finish star 18 of the mystery stars. I appreciate you joining me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please give the channel a thumbs up. Share the channel with other people so they can subscribe. So when you subscribe, you get all the notifications. Ring the bell so it reminds you when to join me. I appreciate you guys more than you know. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody. Have a great week. Have a great week, everyone.